Thanks very much, Cathaoirleach. So, Minister, my question is in relation to what actions your department is planning to take in relation to implement the key recommendations from the Better Outcomes, Brighter Futures National Advisory Council for Children and Young People paper, and what steps are going to be taken to develop a national action plan to address child poverty as part of the next national policy framework. Thank you, Minister.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you, Deputy. I'm very much aware of the National Advisory Council's position paper on child poverty, which I published on my department's website last week, along with the final Better Outcomes, Brighter Futures, or BOBF as we call it, annual report and the updated indicator set. And I've had an excellent engagement with the Advisory Council on this issue, and I met with them specifically on the child poverty paper in December. Deputy, you'll be aware that the Department of Social Protection is the department that leads on the Roadmap for Social Inclusion 2020 to 2025. That's aimed at reducing poverty, including child poverty, and improving social inclusion. So last September I circulated the Council's paper to the BOBF consortium and to Minister Joe O'Brien and Minister Humphreys, requesting them to give detailed consideration to the recommendations in the context of their Budget 2022 discussions. And in respect of the Council's recommendation to give voice to children's experience of poverty, my department has published a request for tenders seeking methodological advice on hearing the voice of children who are in poverty. I've also met with the Ombudsman for Children in relation to his A Better Normal report on child poverty and child homelessness, and as you know, we discussed that paper in this House. So in Budget 2022, within my own department, I secured additional funding to reduce childcare costs for parents, and in particular to reform the National Childcare Scheme to positively impact on children in socio-economically disadvantaged communities and on services with high concentrations of families from socio-economically disadvantaged communities. Myself and Minister O'Brien's officials are in contact with regard to a new target for child poverty under the Roadmap for Social Inclusion and identifying a programme of work to address child poverty under the successor framework. And I'll be meeting with Minister Joe O'Brien later this month about this issue. And finally then, I'll shortly bring the draft EU Child Guarantee National Action Plan to Government. This plan addresses a number of critical matters, securing free access to early childhood education and healthcare for children in need. And as part of this process and in developing the successor national policy framework to Better Outcomes, Brighter Futures, I'll continue to engage with my Cabinet colleagues to pursue a coherent agenda in relation to child poverty, and a key part of that will be the BOBF successor strategy.
Thanks very much, Minister. I wanted to raise this question so that we could actually just raise the issue of child poverty as well, because I think whenever we get the opportunity to highlight it, we should. And I was kind of struck as well. We recently had, we've been looking at child poverty in the Children's Committee, as you're probably aware, and we had the Vincent de Paul in talking about people still, accessing food and still being hungry. And it just really struck me. One of the witnesses said, like in 2022, we still have people either going into school hungry or coming home in the evening hungry. And obviously, food poverty is a key part of it. The whole area of school meals. I know some of this falls into education, and I think probably that's where sometimes things fall down in this chamber as well, when things are, in different departments. But I wanted to just raise the issue of food poverty in particular, and I suppose then childcare. But I see my time is ticking, so I'll come back to the childcare one in the next round. Thanks.
Thanks, Deputy. Look, it's always really important that we address the issue of child poverty in this House. I suppose in terms of the specific element of food poverty, as you know, in both last year and this year's budget, the free school meals programme has been broadened out, and I think that's probably the most practical step we can take in terms of providing an immediate sustenance to young children to really support their own education. And further, obviously, Minister Foley has announced the broadening of the DESH scheme as well, which will provide greater supports for children in the most disadvantaged schools. I think it's also worth noting, Deputy, we discussed child poverty, I suppose, when we both came into these roles 18 months ago. There was a big concern that with COVID we'd see a big spike in child poverty. The child poverty figures released for 2020, which is the earliest we have from December of last year, they actually showed a drop in 2020. 14,000 children came out of child poverty in that year, a 1.2% drop. It's a small drop, but it does show that the measures we took during COVID, the additional supports, did work, and that spike we all feared didn't happen. We actually got a decrease.
Thanks, Minister. And actually, I think that's a good argument for keeping some of those additional measures, and I may as well take the opportunity to say that. But I suppose childcare, we hear all the time, is one of the key issues. And I know there's been increased investment, and there's the plan for the JLC and everything, which is all very welcome. But I do think we just need to keep a focus on as much investment as possible, because we know that it's mainly women that are affected by that issue, and they generally head up single parent households, and they are affected by poverty more than any other household. So I just think childcare, and in relation to the school meals, that is actually an excellent programme, and it's why if possible we should look at widening that out, and that it shouldn't just be DEIS school, because you have kids who are in non-DEIS schools who really need that. So look, I just wanted to raise the issue, and I just think we really need to keep a focus, particularly on the areas of food poverty and childcare, because they are really practical ways that we can help families out of poverty. And it is, I mean, it's not good to say in 2022 that people in our country are still relying on food banks. But, you know, I just wanted to raise the issue and say that if there was a little bit more joined up as well, because I know it falls to education, but I think that as it falls to children as well, in terms of the school meals. Sorry for going over time. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Well, I think the joined up element is really important, and I see that Bob F, the successor strategy to Bob F, is going to have a very significant child poverty focus within it. As a subset of that, then we have the EU Child Guarantee, which is, I suppose, guidance, support, and some financial support as well coming from the European Union. So the Child Guarantee and the actions we take there will sit within the wider Bob F work. But I think that joined up element is really important, and that's why I'm engaging very closely in the first instance with Minister O'Brien, and subsequently obviously with Minister Humphreys, Minister Foley and other ministers. In terms of childcare, you're absolutely right, and I think that's why the steps we took in this year's budget to remove the wraparound hours, which will have a major impact on children in the most disadvantaged areas. And look, that's something you and I and other deputies have discussed significantly since I came into this role. We have taken a major step. 5,000 children will benefit from not having the wraparound hours removed from their free childcare allocation from this spring, and that's a major step forward.
Thanks, Minister.